had some management changes, very reminiscent of about a year ago, and AEW has officially let go of a few top stars, one of which has made an appearance on WWE programming already. All that and so much more. Welcome back to Tights and Turnbuckles. If this is your first time here, I hope you enjoy the show. Please like and subscribe to this YouTube channel and follow us on all of our other social media pages, which you can see where we are at right now. And man, this is one of those things that I have enjoyed for 30 years. I do this each and every week strictly because I love it. So let's get into what we're here to do and talk pro wrestling, because there's some interesting news that has gone on over the last week. And let's jump right into it. TNA had some management change just last week with the release of a few notable names, the two of which that most wrestling fans would be actually very familiar with would be Josh Matthews, who was one of the runner-ups in the very first season of Tough Enough and also did some backstage correspondence as well as on-screen commentary for WWE, especially in the latter part of his career of WWE. After his release, he became a commentator for TNA Wrestling, and controversially, whether it was in character or serious, called himself one of the best commentators of all time. And that was during the time where Impact was kind of in a downturn at that moment. Not a whole lot of recognition was thrown their way, or it was still the old familiar, TNA or Impact LOL. But he actually became a prominent backstage figure. He was very handy during the COVID times and had actually been with the company for over a decade at this point, I believe. So interesting change to be made there. Mr. Matthews no longer with TNA. Another name, Christy Hemme, the original Diva Search winner. Something about the talent contest portions of WWE winners have apparently gone over to the competition side at some point or time. She had notably become a backstage figure as well. Of course, on screen, she was a ring announcer for TNA for a little while, even having a on-screen romance with Samuel Shaw, better known to most people in WWE as Dexter Lumis, at one time. Both, again, were working in a backstage capacity. Now they are no longer there, which is an unfortunate thing. Hopefully, all the best for both parties, especially Mr. Matthews, whose wife is still with AEW, as she is one of the women's trainers for the women's division in AEW, Madison Rayne. Christy Hemme, who had kind of ventured away from wrestling for a while, had just come back into the fold with TNA. Again, not in any on-screen capacity, at least none that I can recall. So, again, best of wishes for both of those individuals. The third name that was let go from TNA, interestingly enough, was their president, Anthony Cicino, I believe is how you pronounce it, or Cicion. Maybe that's how it is. Cicione. We're going to go with Cicion. Anthony Cicion was the president of Anthem Sports and apparently has been let go and replaced by a Carlos Silva, who is now the president of Anthem Sports. What does this mean for TNA? Nobody really knows right offhand. Maybe it means nothing and it's just business as usual. But again, this is very familiar to about a year ago. Now, granted, it wasn't the Anthem company who was changing presidents, but TNA itself in the form of Scott D'Amore and the controversy that went on there for a little bit. I hope all the best for TNA because they've been doing wonderful again. It's great to see another name in professional wrestling coming to prominence when it comes to a promotion, especially one that's been in the game for over 20 years now, and it's had its own ups and downs, and they are definitely on an up right now, especially with the partnership of WWE and the NXT brand. So hopefully nothing changes drastically for TNA. Of course, one thing that did change is the loss of a big name. One, Josh Alexander has now become a free agent for the time being, but the attorney he sought out has already had a reputation of getting big deals done for professional wrestlers stateside, notably Will Ospreay, and it looks like Josh Alexander is going to be following in those same footsteps as Mr. Ospreay and will be signing with AEW. Reports are indicating that this was a situation where he had to look at more of the financial aspect as opposed to, as Dave Meltzer called it, being 25 and young and not really having to worry about a family to take care of. This was his pure motivation, was to make sure that his family was financially secure. And if anything, if you sign with AEW, you at least know you're getting a good paycheck for your years and your own. So you can't really fault the man for that. I personally would have loved if he would have signed with WWE, just because you could have thrown him over on the NXT brand and immediately started either a feud or even a reuniting of the North, the tag team he had with Ethan Page, who is a AEW person that has jumped ship over to NXT and has had great success since doing so. And speaking of jumping and success, we will be talking about the debut on NXT of one particular name, but that leads into the AEW releases that took place last week. There were 3 notable names that had been let go officially from the company and hit the free agent market. Miro, better known to WWE fans as Rusev, has finally been granted his AEW release after we have not seen him in God knows how long. I believe it goes back to the All Out match where it was a bunch of meat slapping between him and Powerhouse Hobbs. That may not even been at All Out. That'll tell you how long ago it's been since Miro had been on my screen that I can't even remember. I think actually it was a tweet that CJ Perry, his ex-wife, better known as Lana in WWE, made just a little while ago. It just popped into my head that it was Andrade El Idolo. I know I totally just butchered that. But Andrade's last AEW match was against Miro at World's End. I think it was not this past year, obviously, but a year ago from there. So interesting stat there, because she did bring up that that would be both men's last AEW match. So who would have thought that at the time? But the 2 big names that came off of that was one, Malachi Black, who has notably been reached out to by WWE to be back in the fold, and there were reports that were circulating that maybe he was going to retire, that he had grown tired of the wrestling game itself. But since Triple H has taken over creative and we've seen the success that he has had, especially with some of his more protected NXT guys from the day, I think it's safe to say that we could see the return of Aleister Black sooner rather than later and would be a notable force on the WWE roster side. But another name that many had been waiting to hear, been a free agent, has already made an impact and has jumped ship to the other side. One, Ricky Starks. That's right, the man who calls himself Absolute and had been in some notable feuds for the debut of the Collision show against both Bryan Danielson as well as CM Punk, has finally made the jump and has been let go from AEW, only to then, literally 24 hours after the news came out, appear on WWE's NXT brand, and it looks like that's where he will be for the foreseeable future, as his contract signing is slated to take place tomorrow night on NXT. So that'll be interesting to see what happens there. And I tell you, I think this is going to be good for him, and I think this was great of AEW to go ahead and let Ricky go because he wanted to go. They didn't want him there anymore. It's better to just be 2 ships passing in the sea and move forward, wishing both y'all the best, whatever the case may be. I hope both sides are happy. I'm sure AEW is going to be just fine, especially after their Grand Slam show that took place in Australia. Starks has been wanting this. I think we all know that he was going to fit in perfectly with WWE, and him being on this, what I like to refer to as the Platinum and Black era of NXT, as they mentioned over on Vengeance Day, which we'll talk about in just a little while. You had in the main event, the Fatal 4-Way Women's title match, you had 3 different eras of NXT represented. Black and Gold with Bayley, the 2.0 era with Roxanne Perez and Cora Jade, as well as this new era with the current reigning champion, Julia. And they didn't really put a name with it, but I mean, I would call it the Black and Platinum era. That would be my go-to, because you've already had Black and Gold. The only thing you can do is better in some form or fashion, outside of Diamond, go for the next thing, which Platinum is a steel that's actually tougher to break than Gold. So yeah, I'm going with Black and Platinum, and that was actually a great show, which again, we'll talk about momentarily, but it is going to be interesting to see what happens with Ricky Starks now that he is finally over on the WWE side, where a lot of people, including myself, feel like he should be. There is also news that WWE could be possibly able to pick up Phoenix here sooner rather than later. Ray Phoenix, because it looks like AEW could potentially release Phoenix, not because of all the controversy that's gone on, but because they realize that it's stupid to kind of keep a person that you don't plan on using on your roster at all, and you're just making them wait it out. It's useless for the talent. It's useless for the promotion itself. It's just literally throwing away money. And there is a rumor that that may actually come to fruition, and Phoenix will get his release from AEW. Only time will tell. Most people like myself agree that, you should fill out the contract and just go with it, even though you had the time extended due to injury. I get it. It's frustrating. You don't want to be there, but you did sign the contract, so finish it out. Either way you look at the situation, hopefully both parties involved will be able to move on and find success in another form or fashion. But last little bit of news before we move into the weekly review. Charges have been dropped by the federal government on Vince McMahon, mainly in the case of maybe hiding this from the WWE financials as well as the company itself when he did his NDA and hush money scandals. Now, this does not mean the Janelle Grant case has been dropped. This is the federal government's case that they had, again, for stating that McMahon was very notably making sure that certain things didn't reach the WWE company, and he was using funds as part of that hush money from WWE to cover his tracks and to pay the NDA clauses to the people that signed them. Whether that's true or not, we're never going to know at this point. Of course, people like myself figured that it probably was, but so far it looks like we're going to have to wait again to see how the Janelle Grant case ends up. But as of this moment, it looks like Vince is getting off the hook again, which a lot of people are a little upset about, but really some of us have not really been surprised by this outcome whatsoever. Mainly this comes down to the moral aspect of the whole situation. What Vince McMahon has done may be morally reprehensible, but illegal and human trafficking, nonetheless, I think is a bit of a stretch. That's just my opinion. I don't think he's necessarily the best guy to be around, so I'm not vouching for the man. But I am saying that I think at the very least, people have kind of gone overboard with the way that they have presented this situation. So, I don't know. It's not up to me to judge. There's only one person that can do that, and it's not me. So I won't judge the man based on what happens out of these cases, only from what we've seen. We know that he's had issues personally, as well as, just a screw never seeming to be completely tightened there. So it looks like McMahon could be looking at more of his freedoms coming back sooner rather than later again in that situation as well. And we might possibly even see him start up a new fed. That had been a rumor that had been making rounds late last year. Only time will tell if he ends up doing that once everything and this dust settles on all of his cases. But at least he can celebrate knowing that he is free of this federal charge now as well. Now, let's move into our weekly reviews because we know how this goes. It can go for a minute, and we've got two big-time events that took place over the weekend to get to as well, so let's jump right into it. The winners of the Royal Rumble have officially made their picks. We'll talk about Charlotte's here in a little bit, but over on Raw, Jay has officially picked Gunter, and we saw the first WrestleMania rendition. Gunter and Jey Uso for the world title is going to be taking place. Liv and Kyrie both had some interesting cuts to share on their social media pages on their eyes from a battle with Damage Control and Raquel Rodriguez and Liv Morgan. Good tag match for them. Both walked away with some wounds, but it looks like Damage Control had picked up the victory this time around over Morgan and Rodriguez. And then we saw AJ Styles come back and start his promo only to get sized up, or tried to, by Dominic Mysterio, and then backstage later on by Braun Breaker. A lot of people, including myself, think that a Breaker Styles match could be fun. I believe that 100%. Could it even be a Mania match? We might talk about that here in just a little while, because there's been a lot of rumors regarding the WrestleMania card. The proposed card has been online for the last couple weeks, and I've wanted to talk about it. We've just ran out of time. Hopefully we get a chance to do that on this episode. If not, then this upcoming episode for next week will actually be the one where we'll get to talk a little bit about it and my opinions, as well as some suggestions, because there have been rumors of another big time match that could be altered. Maybe we'll talk about that here in just a moment. But Again, back to Monday Night Raw, the War Raiders retain their tag team titles, and Logan Paul becomes the newest entrant inside the Elimination Chamber after he had defeated Mr. Rey Mysterio in yet another impressive showing. Move over to NXT, and Cora Jade picking up an upset win over Bayley, which got her added into the Fatal 4-Way match at Vengeance Day for the NXT Women's title. Josh Briggs and Inamura, who have been a makeshift tag team since Inamura has come over for his excursion from Pro Wrestling Noah, they won a 3-way dance for the number one contendership to take on Fraxium at NXT's Vengeance Day. They picked up the win. They were the ones that would go on to the tag title match. Zarya picks up a win over Nikita Lyons in a decent showing for both women and continues her tag team with Sol Ruca. Curious to see where that's going to end up playing out. Trick Williams and Eddie Thorpe ended up getting into a scuffle, which led to Eddie Thorpe challenging Trick Williams to a strap match at Vengeance Day. Tony D gets inside the steel cage, defending his NXT North American title against Ridge Holland, and walked out the victor, only for him to then be attacked by none other than Shawn Spears and his cohorts. It's going to be very, very much an interesting story how they tell this with Shawn Spears and Tony D'Angelo. Spears will be taking on the underboss, Stax Lorenzo, this upcoming week. So I'm very curious to see what they do with this, because I'm a big fan of the Tony D'Angelo character as well as the family overall. So I like the storylines that they do with them, and I can't wait to see what that faction eventually does when they move them up to the main roster. But the only thing anybody could talk about for NXT was the shocking appearance from the crowd of Absolute Ricky Starks. He again signs his contract this upcoming Tuesday, and many people have speculated if he's even going to go by the Ricky Starks name, because they have still yet to use his name. So I believe he is going to go by Ricky Starks. Most people feel that same way, but it is WWE. They could always surprise you with something where you're like, oh, look at that. It's Jackson Stickies or something like that, you know. I don't think that'll be the case, but we'll find out tomorrow night, actually. I was about to say next Tuesday. It's Monday morning, y'all, and I've had a great weekend, so please apologize for my mind sometimes thinking a little bit faster than my words. But yeah, tomorrow night, Ricky Starks signs his official NXT contract. And then we move over to SmackDown, where Naomi has become the newest entrant in the Women's Elimination Chamber match. They also got to see new footage of Jade from being attacked a few months back. It looks like, well, Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez were in the vicinity, but were they the ones that actually did it? Most people still believe that is not the case, and some thought this was such a bad reveal, and it's like, guys, I don't think this is a reveal. I think this is a red herring. So be on the lookout, because I don't think we are done with the Jade story. I'm still sticking with Naomi as the one who took out Jade, and oh man, I really hope that we get an answer before Mania season, because I think it could lead to a big-time match for whoever it was that attacked Jade Cargill, and that leads to a Cargill one-on-one match against said individual. Then we saw LA Knight achieve another victory to get himself a rematch for the U.S. title, picking up a win over The Miz. And it'll be interesting to see how this next Nakamura Knight match goes. You could argue that they're going back to the well after this has already been done and over with, but it could end up being a good matchup because they did beforehand. I still enjoy the Nakamura revamped character of the Lost Samurai. So this has been fun to see Nakamura transform into this new version. I think this has been one of the best versions of Nakamura since his debut, really, back in NXT. So LA Knight's picking up where he left off, getting on fire with the crowd yet again. So I look forward to seeing what comes for LA Knight and Shinsuke Nakamura and the eventual U.S. title match to take place between the two. Tiffany Stratton defended her women's title against Nia Jax, picked up a huge win, only for Charlotte Flair to come and finally make the announcement that she has chosen Tiffany Stratton to face off at WrestleMania for the women's title. In that same matchup, we saw Trish Stratus, who was a guest, get involved and stopped Candice LeRae from getting involved in the match. She has made it clear she will be in Toronto at the Elimination Chamber. It looks like we may be getting Nia Jax and Candice LeRae taking on Tiffany Stratton and Trish Stratus. It's, as I told my wife, and she saw it when it happened on TV, you've got my teenage crush in Trish Stratus against a woman that I admire greatly this day and age and has such a bright future, Tiffany Stratton. The TS's teaming up, and no, I don't mean Taylor Swift, taking on Jax and LeRae. I think we are looking at that becoming a match for the Elimination Chamber PLE. Then we saw Damian Priest pick up the 5th spot in the Elimination Chamber for the men as he beat both Jacob Fatu and Braun Strowman in a triple threat match that saw Solo Sikoa get involved and accidentally Spike, Tama Tonga, and Cody Rhodes came out to help make the save and take out Solo Sikoa. So, interesting little tidbits there. I look forward to seeing where we're going with Rhodes and Solo. Is he going to be in the title match? Will he be the final participant in the chamber? All these questions we still have left unanswered. And is there problems between Fatu and Tama Tonga against Solo? This is going to be very interesting to see how this plays out heading into WrestleMania season. And Zayn and Owens. Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn both put out comments about what happened in the package pile driver just last week. Owens saying that Zayn deserved it. Zayn can't believe that his friend did this. This is leading to the confrontation to take place, and I know it will happen at WrestleMania. And most people are just wondering what's the stipulation going to be, and I have some thoughts on that. That will be what we talk about with the proposed Mania card, as well as what I would like to see. Again, we may not get to that this week. If not, I promise we'll talk about it next week. Let's jump over into AEW, where Hangman Adam Page and MJF look to be on their collision course, as MJF told Adam Page after he had picked up a victory over Max Caster this week that he just doesn't have that kind of grit in him to be a bad guy, while MJF does, and he showed it when he took out Dustin Rhodes this past week. The Death Riders retained their 3-man tag titles, their trios titles, over the Undisputed Kingdom. The Ops has officially been formed, which is Hook, Samoa Joe, and Shibata. Another faction that I think is not really going to be a whole lot of good for anybody. No offense to those 3 individuals. I just think this is a weak thing to put these 3 together because you don't have anything else to really do with them. It seems to be what goes on when you don't have anything for your other people and you just want to throw them together for a faction. Then we saw Megan Bain's in-ring debut for Dynamite, which after she picked up the win, she was confronted by Miss Chris Statlander. That could actually be a very fun match between those 2 powerhouse ladies. Looking forward to seeing what goes on there. Jericho and Bandito did a square off as if they were in an OK Corral situation that just didn't hit for me, but you know what? Maybe it just isn't my flavor. The tag team champions retained their titles over the Guns. The Hurt Syndicate, still your AEW tag team champions. Harley Cameron pulling off a promo of a lifetime before her title match against Mercedes Moné at Grand Slam this past weekend. And man, Harley Cameron has just shown how good she really is, and I look forward to seeing what she can do in the near future. Adam Copeland, or Cope, stole the briefcase from the Death Riders and Jon Moxley, only to be confronted by them at the end of the show and lead to the Brisbane Brawl that took place over the weekend as well. This also set up the match between Cope and Moxley for Revolution and the AEW title. So that has officially been made for the AEW Revolution pay-per-view. The main event for the world title. Will Cope take the title? I tend to think so, and I think shortly thereafter we'll see Christian Cage cash in his title opportunity, because it'll lead right back to a Cage and Cope feud, and this time the AEW title will be involved. That's my guess of what we're going to see, and I'm pretty confident in that. Over on the TNA side of things, Joe Hendry retained his his TNA title over Jake Something. Cora Jade defeated Xia Brookside in her TNA match. She's trying to get to Masha and her championship. Masha even retained her title over Miss Savannah Evans this past week, and in the goodbye match for Josh Alexander, taking on Eric Young in his final TNA match. Obviously, we talked about where he could be heading here sooner rather than later, and I really wish he would have come to the E. I understand why he's going to AEW, but he is always going to be one of the staples of TNA, especially over the last almost 10 years now. Josh Alexander, I appreciate everything that you put in during your time at TNA. Wish nothing but the best for you, and I know based on some of the reactions from the locker room companions, such as Moose, your current X Division champion, he is going to be sorely missed in that locker room, as again, he became a focal head for the company and a very well earned one at that. All the bests to Mr. Josh Alexander. Well, guys, before we get out of here, let's go ahead and real quick go over both the Collision and Vengeance Day shows. Both shows were actually pretty good. Don't have any complaint really with either one of them. Over on the Vengeance Day side, we saw Stephanie Vaquer pick up a win and become the new Women's North American Champion. Eddie Thorpe defeating Trick Williams in the strap match was actually pretty surprising. I'm so shocked that took place. Ethan Page defeated Javon Evans in their one-on-one matchup. The Fraxium team retained their tag titles in a very good outing over Briggs and Iomura. Then we saw the NXT title match with Obafemi taking on A-Town Down Under, where he picked up a win there. And this mysterious, what almost looks like Shield 2.0 team appeared both at the end of the tag match and the championship match. Who knows what they have in store? Hopefully we get more answers from them this upcoming week. And in the main event, we saw Julia retain her NXT Women's Championship in a great outing, only to be interrupted by the NXT arrival of Jordan Grace. She's got next. What title is she going for? Can't wait to find out. And then on AEW's Grand Slam Australia, outside of a few issues with apparently a ring being a little too small and Mr. Buddy Matthews getting an injury from doing his entrance. Hopefully it's not too severe and he won't be out for too long, if at all for that matter. It was actually decent. Did it really further too much along? No, I don't really believe so. We saw the Brisbane Brawl take place, as we pointed out earlier, with the Death Riders. In this case, it was Mox and Castagnoli taking on Jay White. And Cope, who ended up on his face being choked out by the Death Riders. So we know that the main event's set. It'll be interesting to see what they do to get to Revolution here in the next couple of weeks. Then we saw Harley Cameron get her TBS title shot, and in a great outing, unfortunately came up too short, but Mercedes did give a great match to Harley Cameron, who had a great showing, and honestly, I hope more is coming for Harley because she has been quite a character and she's such a talent. So I think there's a bright future ahead for Miss Cameron. We saw at the beginning of the show the tag team match that everybody was talking about, Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega taking on the two members of the Don Callis family, Takeshita and Kyle Fletcher, in a great match that saw a awesome Hidden Blade One Wing Angel combo move to end the match. I think we can call that the Angel's Blade because that was pretty freaking dope to see. And then two more matches for Revolution were announced. Takeshita will defend the international title against Mr. Kenny Omega, and then a steel cage match to finish out the rivalry between Will Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher has also been made. So that's fun. Buddy Matthews took on Kazuchika Okada. That saw Okada have a awesome entrance that they better stick with the laser lighting. It looked so cool and gave him back a little bit of that aura that's been missing. He had a good outing against Buddy Matthews, who who came up short this time, and Kazuchika Okada retained his international title, but it was all about Timeless Toni Storm and Mariah May. The main event of Collision Grand Slam, great match between those two women. I was looking forward to it, and Timeless Toni Storm making history by becoming the first four-time women's AEW champion. Great showing, and both PLEs, if you will, or big-time shows for both companies were main evented by their women. That is amazing. Great things there. I very much saw a lot of great things from both women's matches, and the fact that that was your main event for both sides just goes to show how far women's wrestling really has come here stateside, and you love to see it, honestly. Guys, that's going to wrap up the rest of our show tonight. What did you think of Collision Grand Slam? What did you think of Vengeance Day? How do you feel about Ricky Starks, and do you think he keeps his name when he signs his contract? All that and so much more, sound off in those comments down below. I will be back next week. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel as we stated at the beginning of the show. Follow us on our socials, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok. Again, I will see your pretty faces next week where we will come back here to Tights and Turnbuckles. And guys, you just continue to be awesome. God bless you. Have a wonderful week and continue to love pro wrestling.